I'm Sean Van. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sean VanGordon. I am the mayor of Springfield, and welcome to our second ever visit with Mayor VanGordon. I've got Nancy Newton here, and I'll let her go ahead and introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Nancy Newton. I'm the city manager, and just helping out whenever the mayor needs it, which is very seldom.
And then I've got Neil Ladati on the working the technology for us tonight. Really, our plan tonight is to have me make a couple of opening comments and then give people an opportunity and just take advantage of the additional time together for people to queue up. And if you've got a question about what's going on in the city, I'm more than happy to answer it, or if you've got either an idea or something you want to share, we can follow up on it. Our goal really is just to have a conversation about what's going on in our community, what direction we're going, and just generally drive a conversation, because it's a little bit harder to get together as a group. So from a process perspective, Neil, can you walk people briefly through what you're going to need them to do to get in the queue?
Yes, you bet. So anyone who's been here for some of our council meetings will do it the same way. There's a raise your hand feature. Raise your hand will get you in the queue. We also have a chat feature available tonight, and you can put your question in the chat as well. And if you are, this isn't an official council meeting, so give your information. I'll just say the name that's on the attendee list, whatever you've written down. And we'll try to keep our comments to 3 minutes, but open to conversation. So we're pretty easy.
So if you guys want to start raising your hand, if you have a question, I'm just, in these conversations, it's really easy I always want to kind of start with how the organization actually works from a city government perspective. So the city of Springfield runs on a council manager form of government, right? Which by far is the most common form of government. Portland's got the rare one. That's a whole other conversation about their model of government. But what that means is the council and the mayor are elected citywide, and we set policy and direction for the city. And then we hire Nancy. She's one of our 3 employees, and her role is to run the day-to-day administration of the city. So when you have questions, some of this may jump between me if it's more a policy question, and then Nancy if it's more sort of an administration or how the function of government actually works. So if you're interested in getting involved in the conversation, please feel free to raise your hand at this point, and we'll definitely bring the first person up. So while the first folks are coming up, and I can go ahead and just kind of talk about some of the things that are going on in council. And again, the goal is to really open up the Q&A. So as soon as people raise their hand, we'll get somebody up here to ask a question. So the council had been on recess since part of the summer, and we came back in early September for what is really talked about as our fall session, right? And that's a place where we start kind of getting caught up on a lot of different things that are going on in the city, and then we'll be in session probably until mid-December-ish, and then we'll take another break, and then we'll reconvene in 2022. Some of the big things that have been happening and are coming down the line in this fall session are really talking about the relief funds that we've gotten as part of the COVID relief package. So the city's getting about $13, maybe $14 million in relief funds. We had a conversation a few weeks ago about, okay, well, what do we do with this additional money? The city council really talked about breaking it up in a couple of different layers. There's some infrastructure investment that we have to do around the city that just sort of has been neglected. If you look at our elevator near the museum, it's not functioning, right? We have an older building that needs some additional investment. And that goes all the way through using about half of it related to just filling in the hole in the budget that COVID has left. So to give you some perspective, since 2000, the city's at its probably lowest FTE number since about 2009, which would put us more like we're staffed for servicing this community more like what we were in the right after the 08 session. And so the other things we talked about that night, which were really exciting, were anything from adding additional street trees, making some additional infrastructure investments in buildings and facilities. Willamette Lane, who's a great community partner, has got a request for some of that money that they're refining at this point. It may help with things like childcare. And I think we've got our first question.
Yes, Mayor, we have our first hand. It's Kirsten Vignetta. And Kirsten, you should be able to unmute your microphone on your side.
Can you all hear me?
We sure can.
Okay. Hello, Neil, Nancy, and Mayor VanGordon. Thank you for creating this opportunity for folks to ask questions and contribute comments to local government. I think it's a really nice opportunity for us to connect with you all. My question is, as a Springfield resident and as somebody who focuses on this as part of my research at the University of Oregon, and also as a parent of a young child that is intended to hopefully live in this world for an extended period of time. My question is about climate change. Oregon now has a lengthy and impactful fire and smoke season, which of course is not entirely because of climate change, but that's a huge factor. And then this past summer, we live in a house with no air conditioning, and we hit an astounding 113-degree day that I believe was unprecedented. And of course, projections for anyone who is reading anything about climate change point to these phenomena becoming more and more pronounced and more frequent, and some like a new normal for all of us, but with disproportionate impacts. So my question is, how is Springfield city government addressing climate change? And do you have in place, or do you have plans for a climate change vulnerability assessment or climate change adaptation plan for the city?
So let's start with all the way, up at the kind of what's happening now, and then we can kind of go into some of these other detailed questions. Right now, we don't have a lot of that stuff in place, and when we think about what the other jurisdictions that make up Team Springfield had in place, my guess is that they don't have a lot of that in place at this moment either. At the state level, the governor signed a climate change action plan that requires us to do certain things. And there's still, that conversation is sort of in rules making right now. So one of the things that I've chosen to do as mayor is really sort of advocate not for those during those rule making conversations, is to really try to find resources for cities if we're missing some of these items, to say, how do you even get started, to actually pull back and say, let's actually help people get, items in there to get started. Sometimes it's a sustainability plan. Sometimes it's a survey of, your different emissions sources. Sometimes it's just, seeing the parts that you're actually sort of missing. So really, we have to start this conversation. One of the reasons that I chose to get up, that I chose trees, right, that I've been advocating for, is it's something simple that when you look at the center of the city, we actually don't have a lot of tree cover in the center of the city as far as those residences, and looking for something simple that we could invest in that could help manage the temperature on actual, on the actual streets was something that was profoundly interesting to me. I can tell you from a professional perspective that, for a long time prior to getting into city government, I worked for UPS on routing, right? And there's kind of a interesting story here, because when you think about good environmental initiatives, they all sort of either use the term pencil, they all sort of have some sort of return. I just want people to see that good environmental initiatives are also good business and good community initiatives as well. So like I said, we're really starting that conversation. In my mind, the first thing we've got to get done is figure out what we're going to be required to do from the state. And that's in particular so that we don't essentially have to redo that work. And then we've got to kind of start down that track sort of together, looking for different partnerships in town to press things like resiliency, talking to the utilities, talking about the transportation to people like LTD and how they expand services, and really just start taking this thing one step at a time and see where we can go. It's a really good question.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So again, if you want to get in the queue, all you have to do is raise your hand, and then we will get you up here and ask some additional questions. I'm going to keep talking about other things that are happening in the city while we're giving people a chance to get ready and jump in. One of the other conversation that I thought was really critical that we had last night was we really talked about fire governance. That's kind of a technical thing because it's not something that the average citizen sits on, just sees every single day. Since for about 15 years, Springfield and Eugene have effectively operated as one fire department. And we're really at a point between these two jurisdictions that we have to kind of pull back and have a conversation about, well, what is the governance model should be? What are our collective goals? And what is our strategy to make sure that we have good fire service across the Eugene Springfield area? So our part from the Springfield Council side was really just to start, refamiliarize ourselves with where we've been, and then get ready to have sort of a subcommittee conversation between the city of Eugene and the city of Springfield are going to have appoint elected officials to sit on a subcommittee to essentially just talk about and get to a plan about where do we want to go with the fire department. It is big, it is complicated, but it's not something that's really seen by the public because our day-to-day, our firefighters do a great job of caring for the people in the city. We really need to come back and fix some of the administrative issues that we have behind the scenes. Other things that are sort of coming up that are pretty critical are we are going to have a police update in the next couple of weeks. I know that is something that there's a lot of interest in. And, we talked about it earlier in this year because there's a lot of reports with a lot of different recommendations in them. So really what we're going to have at council is to kind of go through, okay, what recommendations did we put in place? What are their actual statuses? And having worked on sort of police issues and police policy for the last probably 6 months, where actually are we at? It's going to be 90 minutes. I'm sure that we will keep the police on their toes with plenty of questions because there's just a lot going on. Everything from, where are we with these recommendations to what are we doing with how's the body camera integration going? That was something that happened in May. And then, we have purchased sort of additional software to essentially help people track use of force incidences a little bit clearer. So when we think about that time frame that the council's in, that we're going to kind of come back, look at all that material, and then provide additional direction to the staff. Nancy?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate you bringing this up. I really think that Chief Shearer has done a phenomenal job. I think that the council will be, really pleased with the report on the things that they are accomplishing in the police department. We have a lot of, well, not a lot, but we've brought on some new people. 5 sounds like a lot to me when you have a smaller department. One of the things that I am committing to as city manager is I am going to be asking for an additional position in the police department that is focused on implementing all of the analytics that go along with that software program, IA Pro, and really making sure that that gets fully implemented, and also doing more tracking of training resources, It's a really hefty software program, and it really allows you to set different metrics on how you want to track behavior, or use of force is a great example. You can put in sort of markers on let's track use of force and level of severity, and what is the circumstance, and all of those things that go along with it. So I'm excited about the type of information we'll be able to garner from the software. But you really have to, as with any software program, and the mayor knows because he's very tech savvy, you really have to have dedicated resources to be able to put the data in, keep the data current, all of that. And that's something that we don't currently have.
All right, it looks like we've got our next question.
We do, Mayor. The next speaker is Chris Wigg. And Chris, you should be able to unmute your microphone on your side.
Great, Neil. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Awesome. Hi, Sean. Hi, Nancy. Thanks a lot for doing this tonight. Sean, I want to ask about Team Springfield. One of the great things about our community is that our city government, our park district, our utility board, and our school district, we all work together to solve the problems, and kind of that we don't let the ball fall between the outfielders the way that some other jurisdictions that will remain nameless, maybe that happens sometimes. And so I just wanted to ask you about, how do you see the city working with those other partners to make life better for everybody here in Springfield?
Actually, that's a really great question. So if you don't know, we've had a long history of collaboration between utilities, parks, schools, the city, and that's what we refer to as Team Springfield. It's also kind of a cultural name that we throw around a lot, right? Like the sense of how do we work together is, among the jurisdictions is referred to as Team Springfield. And part of that is all of these jurisdictions really overlap with each other. And really that presents an opportunity to collaborate. And as, as the public, right? Like in some cases the city owns it, maybe Willamette Lane owns the park, but your experience is maybe it's not mowed, or maybe it's not kept up to date, or something like that. And really what we want to do is figure out how to talk more left to right so that we can serve the public better. I'm pretty excited that next week is my first real Team Springfield meeting as mayor. The chief administrative officers get together pretty regularly. The heads of the boards get together, probably it looks like about once a quarter, and just sort of talk through what's actually going on. My view on Team Springfield is really kind of the first question that, that we need to kind of, I can't wait to get together and see everybody, right? Like the first thing that we really want to do is just make sure that everybody knows each other. The boards the elected bodies in this city have been around and changed a lot. And there's an opportunity just to meet people, exchange cell phone numbers, know who to call if you have a question, and know what's actually going on. And then I think my second view really is, I view us as both a champion and a supporter. And we want to make sure that we're there to make the other people sort of successful. And one example was, when, Willamette Lane, you guys did a great job with that fit lot over near the rec center, because, and that was a grant that you went out, in a relationship you went out and got yourselves and organized, and you executed well. But that's something that benefits everybody. And to be able to come out there as mayor and just say, hey, look, this is both really, really cool, and it's a big benefit to everybody. To me, that's what support really looks like, knowing that we're behind when the Willamette Lane board, and we have your backs too. The other piece is, like, people have additional initiatives, right? Like the, chair of the sub board, and, I meet and talk about economic development regularly, right? We just share ideas and we sort of go, okay, how do we function and move together better? I know that there are some members on the school board that would love to have Glenwood in the Springfield School District, because it's in the 4J school district now. And I consistently tell them, it's like, when you guys raise your hand and you guys are ready to champion this, know that the city's going to be behind you. And the other elected officials are going to support you when you're ready to make that move, right? So part of this is knowing when we have to kind of help get everybody at the table and, advocate and champion where we need to go as a city. And then the other half is knowing when to maybe take a step back a little bit and let everybody, and support everybody as their individual elected bodies really go forward and, define what they want to do. Really great question. I really appreciate it, Chris.
Mayor, we have a couple of other hands raised. Judy Smith is our next speaker, and Judy, you should be able to unmute your microphone, and you'll be followed by Mike Eister.
Hi, Sean. This is Judy Smith. I know you from working at Catholic Community Services, although I'm no longer there. I have a new position with a nonprofit that is just getting started called HomeShare Oregon. And we are getting started and getting boots on the ground to help resolve some of the housing crisis that our community faces. Being a resident here for over 30 years, I have held on to this flyer that came out about housing support options. I know that you guys are looking at updating housing codes and creating some options that are a little more affordable. I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Yeah, that's it's great to hear from you, Judy. It's been a long time since I've gotten to see you. So housing affordability is something that's critical to this community, right? Because when you pull back and say, to be a competitive community, we have to, get the workforce here. That workforce has to have a place to live, a job to go to, and sort of a community that welcomes them and makes them feel supported. Right now, the Springfield's going through and rewriting its development code, and we're considered really a statewide leader in what we think of is sort of housing options. If you think about the housing shortage right now, the reality is that we are probably at least 10 years away before this thing gets solved, right? So I really want people to think of this as a long-term problem that we have to fix. It's not going to go away next year. Now, if you look at our housing starts in the city of Springfield, the good news is the last couple of years, we've had really good housing years. We've had really good housing years. Last year was a record for new units. The record before that was 2019, and the record before that was 2018. So the work that we're doing really is making a difference in bringing more units online. And then Marcola Meadows, which is one of the big residential sets of land we still have available, really broke ground last year that it's going to produce, hundreds of units. I can't think of the number off the top of my head, but it's going to bring more units and bring more availability into the city of Springfield. So really what I want people to think of is housing in sort of different layers, right? Housing ultimately is a system. So we have to create different places for people to go, and then it will free up more inventory for people to purchase. So on some of the bottom end, right, we have an opportunity to partner and create and look for affordable housing providers that could, maybe build new housing on public land. I would love to see, Cornerstone Community Housing buy 525 Mill, which is the old school admin building. The city committed about $1 million to that as a project last year. They're still in negotiation, so hopefully that will get resolved. And then there's still additional federal money that's available to turn that into a housing unit for families. But we have to really advocate at that level to find land that we can place affordable units in, and then turn that into actual homes for people. In one way, this is complicated, and in one way, it's really easy, Judy, right? Like, we're talking about big, complicated rules, but at the end of the day, we just have to create physical doors and physical spaces for people. The code that we've passed as a city will allow more people to create, to look at their piece of property or maybe a rental that they own and say, maybe I can add another unit. Maybe I can add, a mother-in-law suite, or I can add an ADU in back, or look for more options, so that when we give people more opportunities to build houses, they're going to build more houses. So lots going on in the housing realm. It's definitely something to stay tuned on. It's one big gap that we have in all of Oregon right now is people just need affordable places to live.
Well, who would I go to share the information about this new organization? And the idea behind it is to utilize underused housing, specifically spare rooms in people's homes, and helping them negotiate finding a compatible housemate and perhaps rent too. So who would be the go-to person in the city of Springfield?
So Neil will send you an email. He's got your
Okay.
email when you're registered, and then he can connect you with the right person.
Excellent. I appreciate that. Thank you, Sean.
Good seeing you, Judy.
Yeah, we'll follow up, Judy and Mayor, just to connect with what you were saying about Marcola Meadows. We're looking at approximately 750 units, about 425 single family, and maybe about 325 multifamily units. So
That's exciting.
So our next speaker is Mike Eister. And Mike, you should be able to unmute your microphone on your side.
Did that work?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So good evening, everybody. And a little follow-up to Judy's question. I have another computer going right now, and the City Planning Commission is meeting with Mark Rust at this moment, talking about that development code update that Mayor VanGordon mentioned. So that's exciting. I followed that for some time, and Mark has just been a trooper as the state has changed rules in the middle of the game, and trying to keep up and keep the council updated and adjust as those state rules change. But that's not the reason I logged in. I wanted to comment on the incredible effectiveness of the work in Glenwood. The city has taken concrete actions and has put out an RFQ. My understanding, I guess the reason I wanted to get on, Sean, is because it's so exciting. And I'm wondering if you might be able to give us just an update on where we are right now.
Actually, we're still in the silent period right now. So
Okay.
I'm going to pitch it to Nancy to give the more talking point update, because this is one of those places I'm not allowed to share my opinion yet.
Thank you, Mayor. Good to see you, Mike. I have to say, you win the Citizen Award for having 2 consecutive computers going on 2 different city functions. So anyway, regarding the Glenwood development, we are currently, as you mentioned, issued a request for qualifications. That time period will be closing this month, and our hope is to have we're going to basically field a team of various development experts to rate and score proposals. And then also, our timeline is really trying to target having a selection toward the end of the year. That saying, it can be very, there's a lot of flexibility built into this process, because depending on who decides to put in for a proposal, what an RFQ does, and I know, Mike, you're familiar with this, but I'm just saying this just for the good of the audience tonight, is it is a legal mechanism for the city to engage in further negotiations with a qualified developer. And it could be a team of people. It could be, it really depends on what comes in and how that presents itself. And so at that point, when that group is identified, we can, as a city, begin talking about what is the vision for that area. We have some good breadcrumbs that we've laid in this area. We have the Glenwood Refinement Plan. We know, for instance, that a component of this site we as a city would like to have affordable housing, and we know that Homes for Good has some property as part of the site. So we know that that's going to be one of the areas we're looking at. We've heard from the public about things that are important to them, and that's through the refinement plan and otherwise with the council so we have some good kind of framework that we have in place, and now we're just going to be filling that in with the development team. I'm personally very excited about it. I think that our region is going to be getting more attention from the development community. I think, I don't want to give any kind of negative statements about the Portland area, but I think that it has been a little bit more challenging for people to develop in Portland. And so developers are looking for alternatives, and we really do have a beautiful site. And once you come down and actually experience it and, kind of walk around and see the potential there, it is an exciting project. It will take, it's a heavy lift, and we know that, but we're excited about the potential for this project.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. And then I'll just add, Nancy, as you mentioned about the Glenwood refinement plan, that will go to council for a kind of an update and review on the 11th. So that would be a great time for folks to tune in and kind of get a look at what exactly is within that plan. Our next speaker is a community member, and you should be able to unmute your microphone on your side.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Yeah, I had a question. Last night at the council meeting, Chief Shearer presented some ideas for using some grant money for additional training. And so I was wondering, how are training organizations selected? For example, EPD invited the Force Science Institute to conduct a training earlier this year. But due to their known bias, it appears that training was canceled. So, which I think was a positive outcome. So I'm wondering, how does SPD select training organizations and ensure that they're assisting with the change that the city is hoping to see?
I'm going to have to punt on that one. That is not my department.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a really good question. I think that, training has definitely changed over the past year. A lot of the formal training, well, let me just break it up for a second, because there's the required training that law enforcement has to have for their certification. And those are administered through the state. And there's a department called the Department for Professional Standards and Training. And it's really responsible for a lot of the training that's required training as part of the certification process for all law enforcement. And that's pretty common, as a national model, that usually there's a state program that has mandates on certain types of training. But then individual agencies look to do training above and beyond. I think that in the case of the department, I don't know, I'm fairly new here too. I don't know how training was selected in the past. Currently, with the impacts of COVID, we've been restricted in the types of training that we've been able to participate in, because, for example, if you have training that requires that you're going to be doing a lot of hands-on, work, or that it requires in person, some of those have been, I think, rescheduled or postponed into future dates. But there's a host of training that is available to law enforcement. Coincidentally, I have a good friend that works for ODOT, and she does a lot of this type of training, and she does focusing on risk reduction on streets and helping people identify impaired drivers. So there's a host of training for law enforcement that's available from credentialed people that are in the law enforcement field. But then there's also some of those soft skill training. One of the things that, and I will have to check in with Chief Shearer on this and get back to you. But one of the things that I was really impressed with Chief Shearer is that he he brought in a trainer that it was a law enforcement person, as far as the history and focus, but it was talking about emotional resilience with law enforcement. And I guess I want to say that because I appreciate that Chief Shearer understands that there is an emotional intelligence aspect of this job. And he is really courageous, in my opinion, in really bringing that forward and saying, hey, we're not just enforcing laws, it's how we are interacting with the community. And so, he looks at some of the principles. If you're familiar with like 20th century policing, I think that, was a great model that, I've talked to Chief Shearer about, and it talks about how justice should be administered fairly. And it really does delve into issues like bias, discrimination, some of those things that we know happen as humans. We just, and it's not just law enforcement, it's everyone has biases that sometimes we aren't even aware that we have. So I think that Chief Shearer is taking the department to the next level as far as the conversations that he's having, the way that he is holding people accountable, the example that he's setting, and just like, hey, what we've done in the past is not what we're doing now, nor is it going to define our future. And I think he has been actively creating a more positive, more customer service focused future for that department. So I know I didn't completely answer your question. And I guess my answer is kind of, it depends. It depends on the nature of the training. If it's a required training, then there's not a whole lot of agencies that do that. A lot of it's in the state. Above and beyond that, however, it's at the discretion of the chief. I will say I have a lot of confidence in Chief Shearer and the lens that he uses when he is selecting training for the department. But I am more than happy to talk further if you have ideas or suggestions on resources that we can look at.
Great, thank you.
And Nancy, I feel like I'm plugging a lot of future council meetings, but as a reminder, the police update from Chief Shearer is October 25th. So
Thank you, Neil, for doing these updates. It's good
Yes.
because I don't have the calendar in front of me, so thank you.
That's why we brought Neil to have the extra calendar and screen. So
routine. Yeah.
And I've got a couple other things we can talk about from an update perspective. And if you've got more questions or more, even if you have suggestions on things you would like to see in the city, it doesn't necessarily have to be a Q&A with me. It could just be, hey, look, I would we need a stop sign on G Street. Couple other things that are happening, and then and then we can see what other questions we might have, and then we can wrap up for the evening and see if we can get done necessarily on time. Council goal setting is something where the Councilor Mo and I are in the process of setting up right now. Obviously, we as a council have gone through a lot in the last year, a lot of new people, right, getting past 2020 and really sort of changing into kind of going into figuring out what the new normal is going to look like for us as a body. So council goal setting is something that has been historically done, but this is really our opportunity to get away from the day-to-day, how we function as council, and now start talking about sort of, priorities, what direction we have, what are our actual goals, and sort of begin to think about in bigger time horizons. What's the next 5 years look like? What's the next 10 years look like? And how do we set us as a city on a path of success? It probably will be a weekend meeting that will be probably either half day or even full day. And it will give the council a chance to sort of just meet and and talk about, well, what do we want to accomplish as a group? How do we want to function as a group? And what do we think the next year is going to look like? Other things that are coming up is in November, we will go through boards and commissions. That's quietly something that's really important. Last year, we went through all the interviews in a single month, which was a lot of interviews. But this will give us an opportunity to backfill volunteers, appoint boards and commissions, and just talk about, the city is a government body, relies a lot on citizen volunteers, and we get to meet them, we get to talk to them about, and even welcome, new and, folks to the table to provide their advice and feedback and professionalism to the group of boards and commissions that advise the council. The other piece that I think is really worthwhile, and I'm going to let Neil give us some of the facts about it, because he's probably looking at them right now. CityLink is kicking off and taking applications right now. We keep talking about this is kind of an important outreach effort that the council's behind that started happening in 2018 when we worked our way through what was a contract with ICE at the time. And we had a lot of civic engagement at that moment. And really, we as a council came back and said, hey, how do we even keep that going even further and engage people? And, sometimes the city can be convoluted and it's got different, entry points and what boards do and, how the budget works and how this great community of ours works. And so what we really, Neil had this project idea, which was to sort of invite people in and, just show them how everything works. So Neil, can maybe you talk a little bit more about CityLink?
Yes, you bet. I would love to. So CityLink is a project that, as the mayor stated, it's really just lifting the curtain on how government works. And when we went through the ICE contract discussions, we realized, based on feedback we were getting from community members, that a lot of it was the process of the city was complicated. And if you didn't work with the city often, you didn't have an opportunity to understand that process and really be part of it. And so CityLink is really just that opportunity to meet with directors, to meet with counselors and the city manager and the city attorney in kind of a structured curriculum where you just get to talk about, okay, here's how a city works. I'm going to make these connections. And then when you're out in the community and people have questions, if those folks happen to be uncomfortable connecting with the city with a question, then they may connect with the folks that have been in this program as kind of that safe liaison that could either answer the question because they've been through a curriculum that talks about housing or policing, or they have contacts now. And so the long-term goals are, you have liaisons within the community, but then those folks happen to be excellent applicants for boards and commissions, and then excellent potential applicants for city council, not for any other reason than they've had this training and they're really great candidates now. So we're looking forward to it. It's online, it's virtual this year. It's 5 sessions between October and November, and applicants can apply now online. So we ask you to apply, and if you know someone who's part of an underrepresented community member and they're a leader in the community or they like to be, please have them sign up. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And then I think before we wrap up, unless there's more questions, and feel free, we got plenty of time for questions if you want to raise your hand and get into the queue. Really
Yes, we've got a couple. We have a speaker, Jason Profit, and then following Jason, Mike Eister is back in the queue. And Jason, you should be able to unmute your microphone.
I think I got it. I've never done this before.
No, you're good, Jason.
I want to say thanks for helping me with my noise concerns downtown. That seemed to have resolved. That's for the mayor. And then I got a couple other building issues and road issues up here in the South Fields. South Third to South Fourth between C and D needs to be tore up and repaved completely. And then Fifth and Park Street, there was some sort of construction going up to stabilize the mountain. And I thought the city used to notify the neighborhood when there was a construction project going on, but maybe that's changed.
We do still notify Jason, and I would love to give you a call tomorrow and follow up on these, your particular items.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, any time in the afternoon.
If I may, and Jason, thank you for being online tonight. I want to give credit where credit is due regarding the noise issues around City Hall. I think you're referring to there were some people with vehicles that were revving their engines loudly, kind of doing burnouts on the street. And I also shared your frustration because I could clearly hear it from my office in City Hall. And I like to work after hours because it's quiet, except for my quiet was interrupted by a lot of the noise. So our police department did outreach to them and talked to them about, they're just kids doing kid things, but it was being disruptive to the neighborhood, and they agreed that they would no longer do that, and it was handled without any real drama or major incidents. And so I want to give credit to SPD Police Department for making that happen.
Yeah, I agree. I contacted the mayor and he helped me get lined up with the correct people. And it started on South B at the Lime Lane Park. We got them moved and they went over to City Hall, and now it's just been completely quiet. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah. So perfect. So Neil will give you a call tomorrow, Jason, about the other items, and you guys can talk about roads.
Yeah, it's South Third, and probably if you're being a driver, South Third to South Fourth between South C and South D. Just been a patch job. It needs to be put in the plans.
Perfect. We appreciate it. Thanks, Jason.
And our next speaker is Mike Eister. And Mike, you should be able to unmute on your side.
Well, again, to Jason's point, I try to walk every day, and I've seen city crews out doing a lot of street patching and repairing the yellow paint where it's kind of chipped and worn off. They've done a lot of work this summer. It looks really good. The reason I wanted to get back in the queue is I want to thank you for these forums. They say a lot about your commitment to transparency, and I think it generally adds quality to the nature of our city government. So thank you for doing it.
Thanks, Mike. The other two sort of questions that I get commonly are when we're coming back to City Hall. We don't have a date yet. Obviously, we're monitoring the COVID situation to do it in a way that is both safe and in line with the rest of like what the other jurisdictions are doing. I've got some calls to make about it this week to sort of see what Eugene and Lane County are doing, and then we'll kind of work towards a date and go from there. Our goal is, there's teleconference equipment that is in City Hall in the meeting rooms right now. So if you watch City Council from home right today or testify today from home, our goal is that you will continue to be able to do that. Or if you want to come down and join us at City Hall, you'll be able to do that. So just be aware that, we could be going to City Hall eventually. And when we do that, it is going to include new technology that will allow us to continue to stream that. And then lastly, as we sort of wrap up tonight, I just wanted to point out, like, ultimately my goal really is to make sure that we're a community of opportunity for folks, right? Like, I've got two young kids. People on this phone have old kids and young kids and are all in different points in their life. To be successful as a community, we really need to have a place that somebody can come and feel like that they can build a life for themselves. They can afford housing, that they can find a job, and they really feel welcome to, enjoy the arts and leisure and food and restaurants. So when I think about where we want to go, it's really that idea that we want to build this community of opportunity. So we feel like we're a choice for people. I think that's critical, and I think it's really important. With that, it does not look like we have any more questions. I want to thank Nancy and Neil for joining me and providing the additional assistance. We will do this again. I'm planning to do this at least 3 times a year. I will probably bring a city councilor with me the next time to give people a chance to ask some more of the council questions in more of an informal fashion, and continue to sort of just have conversations and see where we need to go as a community. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great evening.